There we go. Welcome to my second podcast ever. Ironically, we're in a public library. How long has it been since you've been in one of these?
Probably close to a year.
Oh, that's not okay. That's
not ridiculous, but yeah.
I really feel like libraries have come a long way.
Yeah, I never knew they had recording studios like this.
It's pretty crazy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I lured you in here with the potential conversation about what it means to be a good human. I have no idea where to start. Where do you think we should start?
I mean, I guess there's a perspective component. So what it means to you versus what you think it means to society, what it means as a template for everyone else, such as yes and part of it.
Oh, yeah. The whole name of the podcast.
Right.
Yeah, actually, I would love to hear your perspective. And I don't know, we could do intros and I could splice an intro in.
Yeah, my name is Justin Duval. I graduated with a communications major and psychology minor, and promptly moved to New York and went into day trading. So, but I felt like there is a lot of connection to that because I love how communication deals with becoming a better human, and how to really understand yourself, I think, makes you a better trader or probably better at whatever you're trying to do. So it all sort of ties in, and moved all around to California and now to Vegas for about 2 years. And that's where I crossed paths with you, your lovely soul. And
thank you.
Just on a search for what to be doing next, like outside of work.
I like that. Glad our paths crossed. I mean, it's a infinitesimally unlikely event for anyone's paths to cross. And yet here we are in this tiny little podcast room in a public library. Yeah, I don't know. You know, we can talk about like how metaphysical we want to get, but if you want to like lean in that direction, the universe is pretty cool. Like, does cool things once in a while.
I like your optimism for sure.
I think it's a better way to approach life. Life might try to beat that out of you, but it's a good place to start. Right? Don't want to start there. So I don't know if you've ever actually even heard my background. Yeah, you have probably once a while ago. I'm originally going to be a doctor. I have an undergrad in microbiology, and it turns out that was not the way. So I took that degree, ended up doing public service, doing environmental work, went to school at night, got my master's in public administration, and eventually a PhD in public affairs, which just kind of blends public administration with economics. So, you know, incentives matter, and if government has to be done, it should be done well. But I'm really interested in people. Like, I'm one of the few people that I know that is as interested in people as I am in technical detail. And that's kind of like that blend describes me well.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that communication, like you said, is that's the core of relating to yourself first and then relating to others after. Communication majors maybe do study it, but ironically, it's not studied often or probably nearly as intensely as it should be. So how does communication work? What do you think?
I mean, it just gripped me. Like I was focusing more on psychology, and then it got very into technical like deformities and basically when the brain sort of malfunctions. And I realized I was more interested in how the brain works when it's operating at a high level and getting into focus states and like at working with the team and like, I don't know, really knowing yourself so you can sort of self-actualize, things like that. So that's where I sort of let go more of psychology and like embraced communication. It was kind of like accidental almost. I went to my advisor and he was like, you have more credits for communication than something else. So it's drawn me after college. So that's where I read the bulk of my books and stuff is on like, you know, books like Super Communicators and Parts Work and
Parts Work, man. I am so into Parts Work right now.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Do you think, before we go there though, because we could probably fill a podcast with how jazzed I am about that, and I think how jazzed you are, do you think that the work of psychology can be accomplished? Like, so much of this is language contingent, right? Like doing work, talking about doing work. Like,
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously nonverbal components of communication, but we've only really started looking at this for like 110 years, right? To think that there's maybe something about a psyche, right? Like popularizing the idea. It was all kind of spirit driven before, and fair enough. It's one way to view it, right? And we talked about this. So the state of the sciences, all the sciences, every single one is so ridiculously new. A couple 100,000 years that humans have been human. We've really gotten DNA down like 75 years ago, 80 years ago, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. Like figure that part out. Or, when Freud was like, maybe there's something deeper.
Yeah.
We just barely started that, right? Airplanes, all this last like 100 years, essentially. And I think one of the reasons why I want to do this podcast, yes, is to maybe stop controverting ideas. Controverting ideas is an approach. It's a scientific approach, right? Attempting to falsify. Can you prove a null hypothesis? Can you prove yourself wrong? And if you can't, it doesn't mean you're right. It just means that you failed to prove yourself wrong. And rather than stopping the conversation and debating what was, maybe we look forward and think about what could be or what else is. And that takes you out of the scientific realm pretty quick, right? That puts you into the theoretical realm, which I think is where things are more interesting, right? Like, who's to say that we discovered the right way to be human yet?
I still find a lot of value in at least saying some evidence of examples. So it's, some reasoning behind things. I feel like a lot of people, when you get into politics and how they think the government should work, there's really no like evidence, and they're just kind of saying what they think about a thing that doesn't change anything, and they have no intention to change anything. So that's kind of like where I try to, for coming up with theories, okay, I believe this because these parts have worked before. And I don't know, similarly, I love the sides of communication that you can actually apply. For example, learning how to be a better communicator by asking not where you went to college, but how did it shape you, sort of thing. You ask better questions, you get better answers, and like that could sort of directly be tested, and you could see how it goes.
That's brilliant. I love that. I know Elon Musk is a bit of a controversial figure these days, but one of my favorite quotes that I've heard him say is, and this is why Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is so central to a lot of the way he thinks. It's his sense of humor. I think it's philosophy. He said that's the most important book, but I don't want to give a particular spoiler, but it's eventually realized that figuring out the right question to ask is the hard part, the hardest part. I don't think I've thought about that with philosophy so much, but I think you're super correct that, well, we certainly haven't asked all the questions, right? We don't even have words to describe all the ideas. There's this, in the way that I think about things, it's like, okay, so humans have been talking for 30,000 years. In the first podcast, we talked about like a Betty White, like how long is a Betty White? I don't know if you remember that part.
Yeah.
But, for the sake of the listeners, if they didn't watch the other podcast, you have like, imagine Betty White, she lived to be almost 100, call it 100, right? So she's born, lives to be 100. And then on the day she passes, she sees a baby born, and then that baby lives to be 100. And Joe Rogan had talked about this, and not in terms of Betty Whites, but I think it's funnier. So that's more relatable. That's more understandable, right? Because it's really hard to keep track of the zeros when we talk about time and history and what is human evolution. Like, where do we go from now to Stone Age to dinosaurs, right?
Sure.
And, when you think, okay, that makes the country in Betty White terms, if that's a Betty White, the unit of measurement of Betty White, the country is like America is like 2.5 Betty Whites old. You have Jesus was 20 Betty Whites ago. Agriculture, something like 80. And at that point, we're getting deeper into the Ice Age, right? 120 Betty Whites ago, we're like in the Ice Age. Right? New York City is under a mile of ice, right? 5,000 feet of ice, 120 Betty Whites ago. We've only been talking, we think, for something like 300 Betty Whites.
Wow.
It's all new. Crazy new, right? And we really didn't even, because we were constrained before by what we could kind of sing to each other, because we didn't have writing, right? No one around the world had developed writing that we know of. So we're singing to each other the whole story, like all that we know. And then writing let us, the book I'm working on is called The Voices of Our Ancestors, right? Let us hear all of the voices and then compare notes with other tribes' voices. And then things got really interesting, right? At that point. But, 300 Betty Whites. That's how long we've been talking. So whatever we think we figured out, we are, maybe. It would surprise me if we're right about anything, honestly.
Right.
We were all, napping arrowheads, meaning all the human cultures and all the places. Like that was the jam 20,000 years ago. 200 Betty Whites.
Yeah. There was somebody writing a book on, I think it was ethics, and he was like, every time I think I'm getting close to finishing it, I have to change a large portion of it. And he's like, maybe I'm just never going to complete it because his view of that is evolving. And yeah, we're just evolving rapidly in lots of different areas.
I think that's a good point to run down, actually. It doesn't take very long to notice that people deeply believe wildly different things about the world. And if we want to also kind of segue into parts, right? Mm-hmm. It turns out, so you compare notes with other folks and you're like, what? You believe what? Like, so coming to terms with the differences and like, oh, all of those other ways of believing and seeing are, it would be easy and common to say, oh, those are all not like that. Those are, you think what? Like you believe what is true?
Sure.
And then when you have enough perspective, you look back and you're like, oh, I'm just relative to them. I'm just another one of the crowd of you crazy people, right? Like, so that's weird. I don't know that we've really figured out what to do about that as societies. Tolerance works decently well, but even then you're still applying some sort of ethical standard.
Sure. You've got to.
I guess primacy becomes the hard part. Or you just endorse what you think does the least harm. Like, how do you view that?
Yeah, eventually there's going to be finite resources, and eventually one person's needs going to clash with somebody else's needs. Like it's natural on a societal level, and even in a relationship, one person wants to cuddle and the other person wants to sleep. Like you hope there's a lot of overlap, but there's going to be not sometimes.
That's cool. That's a cool way to view it. Like there was a podcast with Lex Friedman and Jordan Peterson. And Jordan Peterson in the podcast casually, just while describing something else, he drops a component of a book. And of course, the name escapes me. I'll put it up in post. But I think he was like Icelandic philosopher, right? Mm-hmm. And he's writing about, well, what he said he had written about is he mentions anxiety, just the emotion, right? Which of course we've all studied, and we've all studied in it probably a very Western way, right? As we would. But he talked about it being about groups of humans, which is because I think it's kind of silly to think about us individually. Like we don't come individually. Like that's not what we are. Mm-hmm. We're always in a group.
Sure.
Like the organism's probably more the tribe than the human, right? That's probably at least a tribe can reproduce. Like you can't alone, right?
Sure.
So he's talking about anxiety as a negative emotion that occurs when you perceive that the group has differing goals. So when you feel unified, like we are all going there. Sweet. I mean, there's no anxiety there, right? Like, oh, let's go, right?
Sure.
But if you sense that, and that works generally, unless going there is going to go off a cliff, right? You actually need to have some sort of decohering, but you still there needs to be like a recohering or adhering or whatever it is. We feel more and more anxiety the wider and wider and more disparate we feel the goals are in a group. This is like how he just kind of drops it as just like, hey, this guy thinks this thing and he might be right about anxiety. I think that might be right? Like it could reach a crescendo where eventually you actually break apart, right? Maybe become two groups of humans going in different directions, right?
Sure.
And it might be goal oriented, or I haven't really thought through the contexts that it would possibly appear in, right? But different contexts it could appear in. But then, I got to get to parts, because it turns out, what if your parts have different goals? Go ahead.
I love that avenue. I guess I would just sort of say that my experience with anxiety has been more on the individual extent, sort of talking through friends experiencing that and sort of noticing that the anxiety source is not necessarily from society, but from what I've seen. Obviously, there could be societal fears. That's more like, oh no, we're all drinking Kool-Aid or something like that. But I've seen a lot of people that are just getting crippled by the what ifs. Anxiety driving is, what if I get hit in an accident. And so much so, like, you catastrophize all these things and then you can't do anything. And, had the experience talking through a friend, like, yeah, you got to lean into it. And then he did. And then it kind of goes away when you kind of basically face those fears and actually say, all right, what if this happens? And like, bring it on. And when you say that, the air of mystery, the fog of war, where you don't see what's going to happen, you just face that. That's what I see is it goes away. So it's not, I could definitely there's definitely anxiety from the tribe going in a different direction. But I think the day-to-day what if is, I would guess, plagues people.
I remember once listening to a discussion about the difference between fear and anxiety. So fear, I believe that I took away from it that they're different. That fear might be, there's a wild animal nearby, right? Like you would be fearful of it. Anxiety, as I took away, at least for working definition, is more like the fear of fear itself, right? So it's worrying about worrying.
Sure. I have not thought about the difference between the two, but I love the question, and it's an interesting thought.
One of the things about us, meaning just humans, is that we don't have the ability to talk about ideas or words we haven't discovered yet, right? Like I did the whole PhD thing. Oh man, it's kind of cool. Like it makes sense in some ways, right? Like you get your undergrad is you becoming fully familiar with the basics of your discipline, right? Mm-hmm. Vocabulary, basically. It's like vocabulary and concepts. And then your master's degree is normally pretty universally designed to catch you up to the current state of the art. So you mostly read journals and stuff. So you're all caught up. And then the PhD, the distinction of the PhD is go add to the body of knowledge. So like you're bringing something in for all the rest of it, the system to discuss and chomp on and think about and apply and all the other part. Like adding to the body of knowledge. And one of the things that I would say fear is that we're not realizing that we might be lacking the basic vocabulary to talk about like better ways of love. Like I say that your mind probably goes to like the 4 Greek versions of like, well, what if there's 30? Like what if there's like legitimately 30? Or what if there's ways of constructing societies or families or anything that are like way better? But we can't even talk about it because we don't have the words. Like we're having to mix up words to get to ideas, which I think is mostly how we develop new ideas. But the constraints there are like we're taking anxiety apart, like fear. Probably social anxiety was more what I was discussing before.
I actually might have a definition for those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took me a little bit to like, all right. And this could be completely wrong. I'm just kind of, all right. So fear is like, you're afraid of something happening, right? It's like a sensation. And anxiety, I would say, is the fear ruling you.
Ooh.
So like you can be fearful, like if you are like, there's even healthy fear, like you should not, stand close to the edge of the cliff. Mm-hmm. But if it's crippling you to the point where you're cowering in the corner after going up part of the, halfway through a mountain and you can't go on, that's the crippling, maybe closer to anxiety. I have a fear of heights that's just like, it's ruling you.
It's like a flooded state.
Sure.
It's like flooding you. Yeah. It's funny for those that are watching. Thank you. But one of the things we're having to do here is, attenuate, like the volume, right? The volume and the sensitivity.
Sure.
And I think that it's interesting that, when you look at fear, like there's some healthy amount of fear and there's probably some unhealthy amount of fear. And those are those are standardized, if we go to psychology speak, like schematically really early on, right? How dangerous is your universe? And, there's epigenetic last minute uploads that are occurring, mom into the kids about like how scarce are resources in the environment you're about to find yourself. And probably also like how afraid should you be? At some level, this occurs subconsciously for, us. Okay, back up for a second. Let's talk about humans being anatomically modern for 200,000 years, talking for 30,000. Mm-hmm. It means 170,000 years humans were us, but not talking. There's a non-talking version of us that does just fine, who's doing the math on which animal they could probably take together and which ones they can't, right? But they're doing that math emotionally. We don't even have access to, maybe we kind of do if we look inward. I guess it would still be there, but maybe that's what it's like, honestly, what it is it's primal, I guess, or something like that. Like sometimes I look at it that way. Like I'm almost, like running on monkey architecture is kind of how I describe it. Right.
Still got the lizard brain.
Even the mammalian part, like, which is on the lizard brain, but even the mammalian part's not like, I mean, can you imagine like humans exactly like us, but not talking, gesturing, I suppose, about like what you would expect, maybe more in the, like the bonobo range, like, and the ones that were kind of in between, they're gone. Like, I guess we won, sapiens go.
I mean, it feels like an immediate yes and of like, what if you went a day, you try to go a day with just grunts, like you're not allowed to say a word. You can gesticulate, you can't text, like maybe you can nod if you're socially. And I think you could probably get pretty far. I mean, if you're still allowed to use GPS, you can point at a menu when you go to the thing. And
I've heard about people going to retreats where they don't talk.
Yeah, silent retreats. That's pretty common.
And then they say, what I've heard is after like a week or two or something, I don't know, 10 days, that finally their inner voice quiets. I've never done one, but I wonder what that's like.
I was thinking about like the darkness retreat where apparently the inner voice doesn't shut up. It could be maddening if you don't reined it in somehow.
Oh, yeah. I'd say again, it's like the volume thing. A little bit's good. Too much is not awesome. Do you have a good primer, a way that you explain parts work or internal family systems theory? Like, I don't know at what level and I don't even know what level the audience will end up being, but how do you explain it?
I guess the most socially acceptable thing I've got is most people have seen the movie Inside Out, and that's kind of, if the movie Inside Out was written more like from a PhD's perspective on, there's different characters within you and different people, and they have different tasks. Some are guardians, some are outcasts, or they call it exiles, where you have formed memories that you have to protect yourself from because they're too damaging. So you send them to the outer realms. And then another way it's also just a way to conceptualize inner you. So if you can't take a compliment, it's very hard to like have somebody just talk to you and say like, oh, why can't you take a compliment sort of thing. But if you think of the character within you, I've had a friend say this was the sort of a woolly caterpillar character that doesn't want to take compliments. It doesn't feel safe because growing up with a parent that you couldn't trust a compliment with, that's a way to conceptualize it. And then you can sort of distance yourself a little bit. And I think with distancing yourself, you can sort of meld things a little more like clay.
That was an interesting way to take that at the end. Melt it like clay.
Yeah, you can interact with it. And it's, I think like,
gotcha.
I mean, it's even how I,
like Play-Doh
deal with dreams, and you can sort of, I keep talking louder.
Because you're getting excited to talk about stuff you like. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. With dreams, if you can kind of distance yourself a little bit and not be as attached, you can, like, horror movies just seem like a movie instead of the most scary thing you're experiencing in your life at this moment.
With my kids, one of the things I would do with them is, you're teaching emotional regulation, right? Like you're being like everybody, like every parent's doing that, whether they know it or not, right? Or maybe sometimes I would dysregulate.
Well, I think that's credit to you, because I don't know if all parents, I'd hope they should. That's a great thing for them too.
I remember, just teaching, it's essentially grounding, right? Like notice where you are, right? Unless you like want to get lost in the movie, and if it's scary, if you're into that, whatever. But like,
sure.
I suppose you're not. It's a stressful experience. Just notice where you are in the room. Realize that you can look away if you want. Like, remind yourself you can get up and leave if you really wanted to. And like, you still have the power. There's a Stanford experiment. Gosh, Stanford, man, stuff they did. Jeez, got away with everything in the 60s. Through the 80s, probably. But there's one that I recall where they took German Shepherds, put them in cages because they're smart doggos. And what they did was, this was kind of like behavioral operant conditioning stuff, right? So they're shocking the cages, of course, right? Of course. Stanford in the 60s. Stanford. But so they're doing that, and they're doing it randomly, right? And your whole point of your brain's looking for patterns, right? That's what it was here. It's what it's here for, right?
Yeah.
Looking for the pattern. There's no pattern. So, at first the dogs would like move to one side of the cage and try like, oh, maybe it was that side of the cage. I'll go back, like, sit down, still get chalked. And, after a couple of days of that, the dog just like laid there and just took it, right?
Yeah.
And that wasn't the surprising part. They kind of expected that. What they didn't expect was that when they opened the door, the dog didn't try to leave.
Yeah.
It learned that it was helpless.
Yeah.
There was nothing it could do. And it just takes a couple days of that kind of conditioning. It's the origins of a whole lot of, eventual disorders and stuff. But
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like you say, like when you can pull yourself back and notice your parts. I was super skeptical. So last 2 weeks, right before I did a lot of driving around Christmas and listened to myself, I consume a ton of podcasts and books and stuff. And Dr. Tori Olds, shout out. She's amazing at explaining complicated, like it's kind of like at the kind of level of like, and we love of the thing, but I don't do the thing. Like psychology is so cool, but I'm not a psychologist, Mm-hmm. That's kind of like the audience that she speaks to. So I can do this part by memory because I've been so excited about it. I've told a ton of people about parts and how neat it is. And I was so skeptical. I'd heard about this for a couple of years. I myself have been through 6 years of professional therapy, right? Familiar with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and dialectical behavioral therapies. And each has like their use case, right? Mm-hmm. Parts sounded so hokey, right?
Sure.
In fact, in probably the 70s, I think there was some movie that came out that was like multiple personalities and it got super pathologized. Like, oh my gosh, like you can't. But then to make the case for it. So then it really didn't get touched for like 15 years, right? Mm-hmm. And this is in the non-pathological sense. This is like in the sense of the way that I like to start a conversation about it is like, hey, sometimes like part of you wants to do one thing and at the same time, like part of you wants to do another.
Sure.
That's really weird in itself. Just that alone, like part of you wanting to do this, part of you wanting to do that. And we haven't noticed how like, we should probably look into that, right? Like that's an interesting situation we find ourselves in, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like that's, short-term versus long-term is like constant.
Yeah. Yeah, what you want to do in the moment versus what's good for you in the long term, like that kind of thing?
Yeah.
Well, so like you say, like there's managers in this parts theory stuff, right? So in internal family systems is where it derives from, right? But people most often talk about the parts part, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea is that when all of us were young, you don't have time to learn how to be human every day and start over again. You just kind of accumulate like what it's like to be in this world. And that knowledge mostly goes uncontested and unexamined. And of course it does. Like it's a lot to learn how to like move your limbs and balance and ride a bike and talk. Like we just started talking. Like talking consumes a lot of our energy, thinking in general. So in parts work, the idea is that, you've got some, I'll go a little sciencey here, talk about like the hippocampus and sorting out memories and stuff. But you have some memories, and all animals do this, like in a certain environmental context with certain cues, right? Or triggers, right? In certain spaces, contexts, within a certain emotional state. Like, is an animal feeling safe? Is it around food? Maybe go eat. If this and this, then go do this behavior.
Yeah.
Right.
It feels very algorithmic, and you're just rewriting code how it feels.
That's funny. It's well said, given your perspective.
My trading it's for backstory. My trading is mostly automated. So there's a lot of if then this. It ain't AI. So I just got to say.
I think, maybe in computer science land, we're stumbling into the same, we're interacting with the same environment, right? So I guess it makes sense that we'd eventually converge on that approach.
Yeah.
So the thing is that this is like considered intrinsic memory. So it's kind of like deeply set, like deep connections that you make when you're 18 months old or you're 6 months old or something.
Sure. And
it goes all the way up to like 5th grade and 8th grade, and even modernly, like you're still laying down core memory, right? But the neurons that kind of wire together, that idea, probably super duper true, right? Like everything that we have ever seen since then indicates that that's well supported, well documented. So the idea behind internal family systems is like, well, most of us have acted out of character, right? It's as though like you surprise yourself with the way you acted, or like, man, like you get overwhelmed with fear and you do something that's like, you're running like a different mode of you. Like there's normal you mode, and then there's like super scared you mode, and there's super, I don't know. What other good parts of it? I'm intellectual. Like I found an intellectual mode that runs almost all the time, right? But it's just a mode. Like it's not who I truly am. Like, and in fact, in IFS, they didn't even know that there was going to be a true self when they started. The guy, Schwartz, he was just looking at his patients and he was realizing like they're running the right program for the wrong, well, no, they wouldn't even say wrong. There were no bad parts is a big part of it.
Yeah, right? That's their sequel.
But they're running, exactly. They're running the right program, but the environment has changed. And your brain's just rounding up whatever looks like where you were and calling it the context. And it's like, what do we do in this situation? Well, you know, when I was, I'll make up a good example just so this isn't that podcast yet. Not personal, but you know, you imagine you're in like, I don't know, you're in 5th grade and you bring something to show and tell, or 3rd grade or whatever, you would do that. And everybody laughs at you, right?
Yeah.
Like, whew, that actually like super duper hurts. Like, it's like, oh, shame is that's one of the core ones.
Yeah.
Right?
That'll stick with you for years.
Forever, really. Like, and if you ever bring something to share, maybe you always like, your brain's like, we've done this before. I remember this.
Yeah.
Let's not do that way again. That one didn't work out. Like, let's do something different. And however you coped, maybe you just sat back down and we were quiet. Maybe that becomes the way you do things.
Yeah. I mean, this one's been like stewing with me for a little bit, not to derail, but like,
no, please.
The fact
just a little closer to the microphone.
I thought you were saying it farther away. The fact that we think about that. Let's say you had that shame feeling. Why at the middle of the night on a Tuesday when you're, 30s or 40s, are you thinking about that time at show and tell where you dropped the turtle and everyone laughed? Like,
that sounds like a real story. Is that a real story?
No. But why does your brain, it's almost like, is it torturing you? Like, does the brain want to torture you? I think sometimes it pulls from memories to like, oh, there's a hamster and that reminds me of the time that I had a turtle. But like, there's other times where it just reminds you, and everyone, like, right? Everyone has this. Why do you think back to those moments of shame just out of the blue? Is your brain wanting to torture you a little bit? And maybe like, if you want to get even more spicy, does part of you like that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We could definitely go there.
You could go there.
I think,
yeah, sorry.
No, it's good. It's good. Yes. And yes.
Yes,
right.
and.
So Eckhart Tolle, I feel like he got to like, I don't know if you'd say this, but like got to like the Buddhist approach, more of an Eastern way of interacting with things when he realized, do you know his story? Like his like intro to his book. So he wrote The Power of Now. Then he went on Oprah and then got super famous, right?
Yeah, I've read some of his books.
Good stuff. Like he was struggling. He was really sad. As I recall, he was going into some office building or some work. And like there was a person who was mentally unwell, talking to themselves and shouting at themselves or whatever. And he walked in and I think he went to like the restroom and he was like washing his hands. And it was something that was enough to draw he realized initially, like there's no difference between that person and me, except I just don't say it out loud. Right? It's all the same things, but quietly.
Is
right?
it?
Well, actually, for him in that context, apparently it was.
Okay. I mean, if a guy's bumbling about dragons all day, like, who knows?
I mean, honestly, I kind of,
right.
dragons are rad.
Or maybe it's the
same. Yeah, I guess it depends on what you're afraid of and whatever. But like, so it was enough for him to draw it apart. And then he realized like, wait, I could actually just notice myself talking, which means I'm not the talking part. I'm the observer of the talking part. Like that meta awareness, right? Like the distinction he stumbled on in this period of crisis in his life. That makes sense. And so like in IFS, go ahead, what were you going to say?
I was just wondering why you can't, I mean, I've heard that and like for sure, yeah, they say that you were the listener, not the talker or something like that. But I'm like, what? I'm not really like, why can't you be both? Like if you hit yourself on the wrist, I'm the hitter and the receiver. Why is it not that with talking?
So he would say, and I want to also not forget about why I brought that up about torturing yourself. So there's a part about it that's different. Maybe I'll get to that part first.
Sure.
So he articulated that the purpose of the brain, especially the talking part, right, is to keep you out of trouble, right? Make sure you're well fed, make sure I don't know what we're going to rate this, but let's mating. Let's say that, you know, like you're feeling the need to mate, like go do the mating stuff, right? Go run the program. With might be behavior. I mean, spiders do it, right? Like cute little dances that the lady spiders like, you know, but the brain is identify patterns and then keep yourself safe, right? That's number one. You can't mate unless you're safe. So in the absence of a problem to solve, and it's funny because problems and questions are almost the same thing, but like in the absence of a problem to solve, and that's what your brain's doing all day is solving problems, right? If you're just don't happen to have any ones large enough or ones that are, you know, consuming your attention, you'll just draw one from the past, right? And like emulate, like just re-examine them. Like what could I have learned or what didn't I learn, right?
It's a cold case.
Yeah. Like, yes. Or, and that's regret and guilt, right? That's how the emotions that those trigger if they're negative. And if you're looking forward in time, and the mind might just draw, my gosh, like, how am I going to get home tonight? How's the traffic? What about, like, whatever you're kind of concerned about, then drawing that into the present is anxiety, right? That's the over focus on that. That's funny. It ties it into what we were talking about before, but that generates anxiety. And he says, it's like chewing gum. Like your brain kind of it's like meant to chew gum. It's meant to solve problems. And so when you're just kind of like in default mode, you're just thinking about things that you have done or could do. And then the talking part of ourselves, which I do think kind of sits atop it all, is just telling yourself the story of you all day. Like all day. You're talking to yourself about yourself mostly, or maybe judging people. We have a social component too, but people are things. So torture, I suppose, if gone unnoticed, absolutely. Like it's absolutely like, but when you notice that you're doing it and you can draw that little bit of space, it will still feel like torture, but it might be, I don't even know. I don't think it feels like torture for me.
No? How does it feel?
So, and this might be the mode that I turn on when I'm experiencing these things is more intellectual curiosity, like interoception, which I didn't learn how to do until I went through therapy. But, you know, what is my emotional state right now? Like I'm actually excited, a little vulnerable, right? Because we got a camera and we're being recorded and stuff.
Sure. Part
of my mind is thinking about the tech and make sure it all goes smoothly. Part of it's just happy to be here with you. But I wouldn't say that as a negative valence. It's a positive valence, right? And, so we're talking about like humans and 130,000 years ago, humans, like they're doing the math. Like, do I run out into the field to go get, I don't know, some water or something? Or there's ambush predators around that made us smart. That was probably a really brutal selection process. But, you know, we got clever and we're like, well, how thirsty am I? Right? Like thirst is basically an emotion, right? Like it will consume you. It'll get louder and louder and louder until you take care of it.
Sure.
So we'll hunger. So we'll,
as arguably they should if you want to stay alive, right?
Yeah. And every one of our ancestors lived long enough to reproduce all the way back to bacteria. Like we are a very, very long line of successful parents.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I like to think about. Not necessarily like the parts part, but you know, for those that have had maybe a generation or two of dysfunctional, let's say dysfunctional is probably correct. Like dysfunctional parents or grandparents or something like that. Yeah. I mean, that does suck. And it can damage the archetype, right? Like in your own mind, the way you view whatever role they had. But I found it helpful to think about behind them are millions of other mothers or millions of other fathers. Like they're just the most recent, but there's a very long line of what we could probably at least imagine was it was adaptive if nothing else. Like the fact that we're here means something went right for our ancestors. Despite a lot that went wrong. That's one of the things I like to think about is hope, you know, like keeping hope. But tell me more about IFS and how you think it plays into torture.
Okay, one last part. Actually, it kind of ties in. It's sort of recognizing, and it even ties in with fears. It's calculated risks, right? We're doing the fear, and even if you make a mistake, you're sort of, it's just show and tell. You have to stand in front of the class. You've decided to take the calculated risk that you don't want to just say no and then get even more attention from the teacher as they shove you on stage, quote unquote. So you have to, so you're doing this and you have to and same thing for the water in the field. Like you eventually, the more your needs go up, the more the risk makes sense, right? For survival. I don't care how hungry, like if you're starving, there's a mountain lion, like you start to take increasing risks just to stay alive.
And I was going to say, like, I love that. I love appreciating that because I think it's helpful to realize why we do what we do. And it's helpful because we can avoid it anyways. Like that's has become the standard with that equipment, right? Like you said, like that level of calculation. There's some researchers that I've read that talk about, computing conflicting emotions, right? Mm-hmm. But those emotions are basically states of readiness, internal states of readiness. Like your body is prepared to do a thing. Maybe it's prepared to relax and digest. Maybe it's prepared to fight, flight, all that stuff. Is like, those are states of readiness, which you can prompt by thinking internally, mm-hmm. which is a cool trick, right? Like hunters, if you want to ambush something, you want to be excited for the attack before the attack happens.
Sure.
And you want your prey to be 10, if you ever read any Brandon Sanderson, but like 10 heartbeats behind, right?
Sure.
Like it's going to have an adrenaline release too, but it's going to take a little while.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like I think when you look in and then with that kind of mindfulness approach, it's what I guess classically what it's called now with the Eckhart Tolle stuff, you realize that there is daylight between your emotional state and reality. Like some folks never are able to understand that. So their emotional state is their reality.
Sure.
And maybe it always is. I don't know.
To some extent. I mean, like it's probably a spectrum, right?
Yeah. Dialectical behavioral therapy is very useful for people that experience surges of emotion, right? Like I'm not really a dog, sad to say on the podcast, but I'm not really a dog person, right? But I did have a roommate who had a dog. So I had like an opportunity to get to know what dogs are about, right? And I just didn't grow up with any animals, so I don't really have that part, Mm-hmm. But I'm watching and I'm like, again, intellectually curious, right? Mm-hmm. His name was Charlie, Australian Shepherd, so super smart, which I found super cool, right? I'm like, you are really clever. Like you can tell he's thinking. And then there was another dog over to visit and Charlie, like low key, calm, chill Charlie. The other dog ate before him.
Hyper.
Lost his mind, right? Like it was the most outrageous thing he'd ever seen. Like literally attacked the other dog. Like, how dare you, right? And I was like, whoa. I mean, I get that in a social group where you're distributing prey, whatever. Like, yeah, that's kind of the thing. It's a status thing. Like the Charlie thought he was alpha and so the other dog, and then they have to duke it out to establish which one's which. But
sure.
To see like a flood of emotion in an animal that as far as I can tell, isn't talking was interesting. Because I was like, his whole world would have suddenly distorted, right? Like outrage. And then the way that he viewed that dog a minute before, I guess I'm anthropomorphizing, which is fine. I think that's, how else are we going to relate to stuff? The dog that was the same dog a minute before suddenly became, worth attacking or maybe an enemy or something, like a rival at least.
Sure.
It's a weird place to find ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, it touches on even why some people act deer in the headlights. It's like using a part of themselves that they don't usually have a program for. I don't have a program for a pole going through the ceiling and going right here. So we just stare there like, what do we do? Like assess just ridiculous situations. Sounds like that dog wasn't expecting that to happen. And then like, yeah, crazy stuff comes out. People sort of, lose their mind. I didn't have a program for coming home and seeing my wife. So like, yeah. So I mean, like,
yeah, that's actually good. You said wife, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one.
For the record, I don't have a wife.
But I've read plenty of stories about people who do come home and find their wives.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so people actually lose their minds, get the gun, whatever. And you're just like, I know it sucks, but there's so many other people. You can just leave. Like people, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff where you're like, why don't you just leave? But it's probably because they don't have a program for that. Like,
yeah, well, they do, but it's a really old program. They're running the one that came factory.
Yeah, like preschool and
no, way before that. Like,
oh, okay.
Like they're running the
Primal.
Yeah, the humans that can't talk version, right? Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit, but like the differences between the different primates and what we know about them and how that speaks to what we ought to expect from ourselves, like, and what we probably ought not to expect naturally from ourselves. Like the fact that we don't do that more often, I think that's cool. Like society, ethics. I'm working on this idea. which I still want to kind of keep it on IFS. We'll talk about this other thing later, but so this is such a long, if you guys are still with us, thank you. IFS. So we can be in multiple minds. Some of our minds and behavior modes, just call them modes, right? It's easy. They were developed for a context. That context may have changed now. And so you're just running them, but they're parts of a conscious mind. Like we don't know where consciousness emerges from, but it seems to emerge. It feels like it does at some point to us. So the sub-minds, the sub-parts of that, it's just, I think you have to this is where there's a little bit of a belief system involved. Round it up to consciousness, right? Just, it doesn't have access to all of the rest of you, right? It didn't wire that way. So, and neither did you. You can't, none of us can load all of our memories at the same time, right? We're running with subsets of things.
Sure.
Right. That are basically just kind of context dependent. We're in a library. So do library stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So when you make that leap to then, okay, let's not talk about the modes as they're parts of a conscious creature. Let's call him, her, pronouns, but humanizing pronouns, right? Then so now you're relating to the part as though it were a person. And go ahead. What are you thinking? And then,
I was just thinking how sometimes it's a creature for me.
I want to keep our microphone just a little bit.
A lot of my parts were, I don't know. I remembered there was one part that I wanted to be more energetic, and I kind of this concept of I don't know. I think I called it. This is referring to a year ago where I did parts work with somebody who hypnotizes a bit, and I was kind of imagining this character like a galvanizing thing, and it kind of was like a metal, kind of reminded me of a metal magnet, and wanting to kind of, I don't know, just there are a lot of the characters that I've come across are not people at all. They're, like that caterpillar or like a different creature. Mine's, a metal figure, metal Gumby. I don't know. Yeah. So it's just sort of interesting. Your brain can go in a lot of different directions with that.
I love this, right? And I'm curious to see if the way that I understand, again, amateur here, but the way that I understand the approach is it can take form, right?
Sure.
But it takes a form that you relate to as though it could answer questions, right? So they didn't, from my understanding is they didn't expect this to be there was a true self in you the whole time. That was not how this was developed. It was more accommodating the switches in your personality types. But in this case, what they realized was if you can do that mindfulness work and just realize that you aren't your stream of thought, you aren't your emotional state. You can actually just observe those. You can be the quiet, calm observer, the quiet, calm, compassionate, loving observer. That's eventually they're oh wait, is that the true self? In science land, it might be centered in the medial prefrontal cortex, right? It might actually have a place that's involved in emotional regulation. And it probably has the best vantage of all of your experiences, right? Because all of your parts, they only knew what they knew at the time, right? And they only knew what they knew at the time, and a subpart of what was knowable. It wasn't even complete, right?
Sure.
So then it gets super cool because you can, with IFS, when you're in that place of calm, there's 8 C's in the model, right? Calm, curious, compassionate, creative, courageous, these 8 C's. You'll know when you're in it. If you just how am I feeling right now? And if that's your thing, that's the space you're in, then you can say, who else is here? And just listen. What's crazy, you'll get answers. If you just reflect inward, right? About the modes that you have and listen, it can be startling, right?
Did you, what parts have you come across?
I don't know if I wanted to be that kind of, I don't know if I wanted to be that kind of podcast yet.
Okay.
Maybe I should lean into it.
I will say,
let me lean.
Child me. Okay.
I'll lean into it. I'll lean into it here. So I've got a dominant part. I have an intellectual part. I have a paternal part. And so these are in IFS land, they'd probably be considered protectors or managers, right? If you're planning, it's going to be one of those, probably a manager. If it's, protects you from possible harm or injury or unpleasant experiences, negative emotional experiences, whatever. That's what their role was and is. And they do that thing for you, right? And it's not oh, let's go get it and then eradicate it, which some of the other therapies they almost are like that.
Yeah.
You were wrong when you were 5. You're safe now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's most of the other ones, right? It's like this one's, not all of them, but many of them. This is like, no, you were 5, and there's still a part of you that's 5. And that part of you, those neurons that wired together there then, they're still hanging out, right? Like there's still like a part of that person in you.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that you can like, once you can be like, oh, okay, then you can meet each part. And this, I know it sounds, if you're unfamiliar with it, look into it a little bit. It sounds so weird, but it's so neat that you can relate to those, because humans are relational animals. Like that's our trick. That's what we do. We can do this. Like we know how to relate to things. We know how to ask questions of things or people, right? We know how to relate to people. So you can go and say like, I see you. Like, I see you. I'm here. Not higher self, right? The true self, as they would call it in the land, IFS land. And you don't have to change anything. I'm here. I see you. And they may never have been seen. Never like that, right? They think that they're keeping you safe from whatever they kept you safe from in their time, in their place.
Sure. They could still think you're 12 or 5.
Yeah, because the thing about intrinsic, this is like the whole, I don't want to go too far down the intrinsic memory thing, but it's important to understand IFS. That there's memories that they used to think that you can like really touch again, right? Minus like psychedelics or something like, and even those were sketched 30 years ago. But just like unexaminable, unchanging, right? So it was mostly like absorb the emotions. It's really hard to get back to when you were 2 and change out that memory. It turns out though, you can, and that was discovered like 15 years ago in some memory work with like a goldfish, that essentially when you touch a memory, when you retrieve it, right? And that can be done by a whole host of systems in your brain. But when a memory is retrieved, there is it's loaded into working memory. It's very much like computers, right? This is like hard drive, like RAM stuff, right? Like it's loaded into working memory where it senses a conflict. Like it's no longer as true as it once was. If attention is brought to that without it being part of a mode that will overwhelm you, right? It's like so powerful. It's like, no, that can't be true. And then it like just applies itself, and then you reinterpret the whole world. Like if you get really mad at, like you mentioned, like a partner or something, right? You thought they were the greatest thing on earth until you saw they left their socks on the floor for the 30th time, right? And you're like, suddenly like your perception of them shifts.
Sure.
Like they didn't change. They didn't do anything. Like not in the last 5 minutes, right? They're exactly, but your perception will shift, right?
Yeah.
So with work in intrinsic memory, what they realized is that your memories, it's almost like a quirk of them is that you can't access them and then put them back the way they were. They'll always be a little different. They'll be slightly different when they go back because you're basically remaking the memory. It turns out that's gonna be super like, there could be therapy there, because if you can hold a memory, right? And this again, you're never in IFS trying to like eliminate any parts of you, but the you, what do we say? Like drop the turtle. Oh, that's horrifying, right? Like, yeah. But, if you are, I don't know, scared to pick up a baby, like, I don't know, some like extension of that fear, right? Sure. You're more competent now, right? Like you literally have changed.
Sure.
So you can demonstrate you can demonstrate that to yourself. You could use CBT and challenge. Like actually I've held thousands of things since, and I've done it successfully, and I'm actually a good holder. Sure. And like, or you could do a little bit of parts work, and maybe if that exile, which would be the part that holds the pain, is like 5-year-old you right before the turtle hits the ground.
Yep.
You can be present to it and not meeting it with only love, right? Like, but a little bit of the perspective of an adult and a lot of the perspective of the highest form of you as an adult. And you can be there in the memory with them.
Yeah. I've had some beautiful moments with that, with, talking through my own and other people's memories, where if you imagine, say, we go back to that memory where we dropped the turtle. Maybe it was a group project. We had a group project. We were both holding half a turtle, and I thought I was passing it to you.
Share the
and you imagine,
if I can, 1 inch away is going to be perfect, because this is going to be a good story. You talk 1 inch like this.
Oh, closer.
Okay. 1 inch. We'll do
you
1
talk,
inch.
You imagine
we're dropping the turtle. Yeah.
We dropped the turtle. You imagine that kid there, even in the moment before the class starts to laugh, and you hug him and you say,
wow, that's good.
Like, it's okay. Like you hold your hand up, like kind of in whatever situation it's, let's say a parent's hitting you or whatever, you're getting spanked. Like you can pause that moment now. And I don't even know if this is IFS, but I found it to be kind of helpful. It's just imagine you could stop time block whatever attack thing is happening to you, even if it's laughter. You could silence the class and say, and just like hug the kid, hug you and imagine like, you're okay now. This is not happening anymore. And even if it does, like that audience doesn't matter. You ain't talking to those people anyway. And any one of the kid, if there's a friend in the class that, you're friends with now, like the people that mind don't matter, right? And the people that matter don't mind.
Yeah. That's good.
Dr. Seuss.
Is it? Sweet. Yes. All the yeses. And like the approach, I think you've like that's like a perfect way of understanding it. So it's like because the parts don't have the whole perspective, right? None of them do. And in fact, even the truest part of you might only have access to some of your memories through them. Like they're protecting the memory, right? Mm-hmm. They're protecting the pain. And it's not a burden that the protector has to carry alone, right? Eventually if you're selling IFS, like in the great story of IFS, like how it works in the end, you end up relieving the protectors, and the protectors grant you trusted access to the exiles, where you can go and, like you said, like it's almost exile work at that point where you're like, oh, what's the guy's name? Saved by the Bell. Like you do the timeout thing, everything stops. You go in and do that. And then you won't always, it doesn't mean like, oh, now you're all on the same page about a thing. That's actually not the point at all. Like parts work involves opening a dialogue. Like, oh, I'm thinking about a new job. What do the parts of me think about this? And you just listen, right? And literally you can listen, and whatever parts are concerned about this, right? Like I've got like a little kid self, like a playful self too, right? He's probably like, in my mind, he's like 10. He's like riding a bike and exploring the washes here, looking for crawdads. Like they might be like, well, what is there to do? Like how much, like can we play there? Like what's there to play? What kind of play can we do? Or
sure, exploring.
Yeah. Or like this could be weird to say publicly, but like the dominant part, right? Which interestingly, when I open these dialogues, he always talks first. Of course he would.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what kind of role would I have when I get there? Or what is the living situation going to look like? Or I don't know, is there a place where I can exhibit myself more fully, right? I like the idea of being vulnerable, and I'm just going to do it anyways, because why not, right?
You can edit it, whatever you want to edit, man.
That's true. I guess I could. But I've been wanting to tell you this story because it's neat. And, transparency is rad, right?
Sure.
So I'm in this road trip, 20 hours going back and forth up to Utah and then back to Arizona. I'm listening to this, and this newer, it's not like I knew about it, but I was skeptical about it. And then the more that I heard about it, I was like, you know what? There's like solid underpinnings here. And I was just in the right mind and curious enough to do the little like exploration, right? Like it's funny you bring up dreaming. I think dreaming, it feels like dreaming. Like in a dream, the characters in your dream can say things you didn't expect.
Sure.
Like you can be surprised.
Sandbox.
Yeah. Like, you mean like a simulation, like a software kind of design, like
you can kind of just, you can do whatever you want. You could fly, you can float, you could.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't happen to do those things. I wish I saw more aliens in my dreams, but, it's kind of an environment to where the regular laws apply less.
I like that. The sandbox. And that's probably, I've heard theories about that's why mammals dream. It is like, what is it? What Jordan Peterson quotes him all the time, Whitehead. Like you have ideas so that 1,000 of them can die instead of you or something like that.
That's beautiful. And there was, somebody had said, I think it was Freud or somebody like that, where each of these dreams, you could break them away to smaller and smaller parts. So I had a dream about, there's the turtle coming back. I had a dream about a turtle flying, and you kind of say, all right, well, clearly turtles can't fly, but like, what does a turtle represent to me? Does that represent turtle has its home wherever it goes? Does that mean that I'm thinking about moving somewhere, and where does that mean that my home is going to go with me? Like you could break down the symbolism and ask question after question, and like you can get a coherent message out of these things kind of every time. It's like, what my butchering of the philosophy is.
I love we're kind of coming full circle, not on purpose here, but the communication thing, right? So before I became convinced that there might be something to the IFS thing, I knew that there were independently conscious cortical columns. There's like parts of your brain at some level are wired in such a way that even in like not the full part of you, but just a part of you is probably conscious. Like imagine like patches of consciousness, right?
Okay.
These things were we're going in that direction when we realized like split brain experiments and like, there were epilepsy treatments where you sever some of the connections between the hemispheres.
Right.
And you're like, well, which side were you on? Like, and it turns out there's probably like independently just tissue that's smart enough to be conscious, but it might not have access to motor control, or it might not have access to the Broca's area or whatever, and like be able to talk. So it might be conscious, but unable to talk.
Yeah. I mean, you've seen pictures of people who have their, skull or their frontal lobe just gone and seem relatively normal after that. The brain can also adapt when you sever things.
Yeah. And so redundancy is pretty neat, but also, yeah, you're right. Like the pattern recognition, the expression of whatever modes it decides is appropriate for the situation. Like that's what the brain does. Yeah. It's a behavior pattern detector and a behavior setter. But, with these independent columns of your brain, the idea is that some parts of you might not have the ability to talk to other parts of you. And in dreams, and I'm a lucid dreamer. I have some pretty awesome dreams. I could probably do a podcast just of dreams. My dreams are so freaking like symbolic and like.
Well, you're controlling them, right? Lucid dreaming means you can control them.
So you have limited control in lucid dreaming normally. You do have, like, for those that may not be aware, lucid dreaming is when you become aware that you're dreaming while you're still dreaming, right? So that you become like literally aware. You just know this is a dream. Like, for example, one time I was driving, in one of my dreams, I was driving northwest out of Las Vegas in a car with my pops. And the sun was setting, but it was setting in the east. And I was like, this is a dream, isn't it? Right? And it was all like super well represented. Like normally one of the tricks lucid dreamers do is they'll look at their hands.
Yeah.
Because hands are, your hands so well that it's very hard for you to emulate the detail in a dream. But in this case, I just asked, I'm like, it's a dream, isn't it? And he's like, yeah. I said, well, then who are you? Right?
I got a little chills. I don't know what. Who are you?
Yeah. And he's like, he said, I'm the group of memories that you have of Pops, like memories and experiences that you have of Pops. I was like, awesome, right? I have one that is like so, because again, I didn't know what he was going to say. I've actually had other dreams where I was asked people in my dreams things, and then I could make them say whatever I wanted. But there's a order, time series order thing, right? Like one before the other.
What do you? Oh, I can just control my dreams if I want to. Otherwise, I could put it on autopilot. Whatever I expect to happen, happens if I want to.
Have you ever felt limitations of your power in the dream?
If it's a stress dream, I have to like kind of, it's like veering off the highway basically. And then I'll be like, no. Like, for example, I have dreams I'm being chased by an unseen something or other, dogs are barking, but I never actually see the thing. And I had to kind of like put my foot down and be like, all right, guys, come on. Like, I'm not having this dream anymore. So I had to be more assertive, I guess, sometimes. But
have you ever thought how often do you lucid dream?
It's just how my dreams are, but not even lucid. This is regular dreaming.
Okay. So regular dreaming, you normally notice that you dream.
Always know I'm dreaming, but that's not as cool as it sounds. Like my graphics card, maybe my graphics card is like from Pong days. And I'm like, this visuals could be a lot better.
I've done some like very serious exploration, right? Of the graphical quality of my own dream, right? Like looking at patterns and seeing, there's all sorts of like artifacts that happen.
Well, it just doesn't look as real. Like my dreams are like washed out. It kind of looks like, when you turn off a TV that's been on too long on a show, and there's just like kind of ghosting, and it's like, so it's blacks and greens a lot of the time.
So there's two components to that. One might be your dreams are occurring that way, or two, the memory consolidation is occurring that way. those might be distinct because memory is really poorly consolidated after a dream. Like it's very hard to remember a dream after you've moved just a little bit. Like
I remember a lot of my dream though.
Okay.
So that part's easier. When I wake up, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember most of what happened. But
I've done a little bit of like amateur lucid dream enthusiasm.
nice.
Right?
I dabble a little bit.
Stanford has Stanford again. Jeez, Stanford. Okay, so Stanford, they have a sleep lab, right, where they study lucid dreaming. They're one of the few universities that's spending time in it, even though we spend so much of our time sleeping.
Oh, nice.
They looked at for lucid dreamers that are like really good at it. They would detect them falling into REM, right? And you can monitor REM. REM's like a super thing, right?
Sure.
But then you still have voluntary movement over your eye gaze in a dream. So they had them do a pattern like left, right, up, down. Once they had established consciousness in the dream while they're still REM dreaming, right?
Okay.
So they had them do their pattern because you can just remember the pattern, carry the pattern in with you. And then they did all sorts of cool experiments to see like, how do you stabilize a lucid dream? Sometimes and people that aren't very used to it, they will get excited when they realize they're dreaming.
Right.
Or they will only realize they're dreaming to try to get out, right? So like, they're getting chased by something. Like spinning is the best technique known, I think, to stabilize a dream. Keep your eyes open and spin. And so much of your brain's attention is dedicated to making sure that it's generating all the visual content for it. They'll draw you and anchor you in the dream.
Are you saying that the graphics will look more realistic?
No, it's if you start to wake up. Like as you come out of a lucid dream, you'll start to notice the actual position of your body. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Like you'll start to feel where you're actually laying as opposed to where you thought you were in the dream.
Oh, okay.
So this is to like cement you into the dream, and then you can start playing around with what powers you have, right? Most people will have issues with, I think actually everyone has issues with causality. Non-obvious causality doesn't work well in a dream. So light switches, you can move them in the dream, but they won't do what you think they're going to do. Like there's no, or like if you ever have a brake pedal in a car, you're trying to stop and like the brake pedal won't work, right?
I don't think I've really had many driving dreams.
Or, but like this, it's when there's non-obvious causality, it often doesn't function well.
Yeah.
I've got it. This is cool that it's being recorded because I've had this idea for a minute. But, when you look at text or numbers or clocks or things that are symbolically represented, you think you know what it says. Like you'll just, it's 12 o'clock, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're lucid dreaming,
is it actually showing 12 o'clock, you mean?
Look at it, like focus on it and see what it's actually saying. And you apply that level of attention to it.
Yeah.
No, it'll be like the clock will like melt, or it will be a funny symbol. Like then you don't even know. Or if you thought you knew what it was, like casually, like you're doing like casual level of graphics, like you said, like the low render, right? Like you're only rendering the close stuff.
Exactly.
So what you can do is focus on it, look away and look back, and it will change. It will have changed. Like you also can't remember what it was just representing. I've got this idea. I think it's a me idea. I'm 900% sure it's just me. This is like a thing I want to try. For people that can lucid dream, okay, go in, find a symbol, look really hard at a symbol, find some text, and it will rearrange. It's what will end up happening if you're staring at it. Like it'll, at least in most people's cases, it will move. I tried this one time and I'm like, just bring one character back. Go into your dream world, bring back one of the steady characters into the real world and write it down. Draw it, whatever it actually turned out to be. Super hoping. I have no idea how this will actually work in practice. I know how it worked for me, but I'm hoping, what if there's a language in there like that we share? That would be crazy cool. Cause it's not, when you get in there, it's not like letters. It's like symbols. So when I tried, and I'll share this just to prompt the listeners. The thing is I don't want to contaminate. So if you want to do it before you hear what I say, it's like what my experience was. Do it first, pause here, come back, skip over. But, what I did was I tried to memorize it. And then when I came back, it was really hard to hold on as I was waking up. And I'm not even entirely sure that it's exactly what I saw. Like it's very difficult to hold on to what it was. But when I drew it, it was a logo essentially from 3 blue, 1 brown, a YouTube thing. It's like the pie symbol with 2 eyes.
Hmm.
And then that's what it came back as. But for those that can't lucid dream, like, try it.
What does it mean?
I don't know. But what if they're common? Like, what if there was only so many common things?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there would be a whole lot of steps on, deciphering that once you come up with the 30 symbol, the 40 symbol alphabet.
The ancient language.
The 40 symbol, yeah. And then have you like, I know you're skeptical, but I'm glad that you came around for parts work. Have you looked into astral projecting at all? Or like, do you believe that's possible?
Let me just really quick, just 1 inch. Yeah. You can move it to
I'm gonna
you.
move it closer to me.
There you go.
Yeah. Astral project, because I've gone to a few workshops on that just to sort of try it out. And, it's interesting. I don't know.
I don't know either. I think it's I am still skeptical of it, meaning I'm unconvinced. But who knows? Like, the way the real world works is preposterous enough, right? With photons moving around, bouncing off things, and
Sure.
like all these like electromagnetic phenomenon that describe our universe as we know it. Like, yeah, who's to say we're not missing stuff? Like, that's yes and, right? Like,
Sure.
the real world itself is pretty like real world, meaning conventionally understood, whatever I guess I believe I'm convinced of at this point. But yeah, maybe. Lucid dreaming is, I think, going back to IFS. So the way that in a lucid dream or just anyone's dream, you can be told something that you didn't expect to hear. I think that's part of you presenting for another part of you content, right? That's the core of IFS, right? Like, there are parts of you that, if asked, can provide their answers. And they believed, when they were kind of generated, different sets of truths. Like, I used to be Mormon, like Mormon, right? The things that I thought were true then are no longer what I believe is true about the universe and the world and stuff. But I'm still me. And that's represented, years, probably 8-9 years of my life where I was like into it. He's still in there. Actually, from his perspective, I'm a huge failure for having left.
Wow.
I haven't really thought about that until just now, but yeah, like, there's a part of me that's like, you left the Lord's church, right? Now, I don't know if it's possible, because I've experienced conversions, right? Like, I converted into Mormonism when I was 15, and then I converted out, I guess, whatever you call it. So I know what it's like to have like a wholesale exchange of values.
Yeah.
Coming out didn't happen fast. That was laborious, because it's not obvious. If not that, then what?
Yeah. Sounds a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
Because of all the social attachments that you have and having to reset, you become very integrated, and exile seems complete darkness, I would assume.
Yeah. It's a hell of an experience, I'll tell you that. One of the things, we're going on like 30 different topics, which I kind of love.
There's so many strands that would be fascinating to pull.
Well, bunch of YouTube shorts.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like is, what was I going to say? Conversions. Oh, churches. Talking about churches, right? And I hope that we have time. Let's make sure we have time. Like, I'd love to hear about if you're ready to talk about it, like your ideas on the way or the invitation, whatever you're, is it ready for prime time yet?
Oh, or? It is not ready for prime time, okay. But, I'm happy to discuss. I'm happy to discuss it. It's kind of like working theories, but definitely not like finished products, I guess is what I mean by that.
Maybe we can save that one for another time.
Yeah.
This is, unless you want to, like, if not that, then we come back to that. I was about to talk about why Mormonism feels so good. There's a way that it feels.
Because there's an answer, because you feel like you have an answer to questions that are gnawing at you.
Okay, there's several. Yes, and yeah, there's several. Good point. There's several. Thinking that you have the one thing that describes everything else. You're right. There's a righteousness in that, right? Like, but that was yes, and communitarianism, right? So I went to BYU, did I went on a mission, got married, did the whole Mormon thing for 10 years. And the origin story of Mormonism accounts for 99% probably would be my estimate. Having known what that internal feeling is, communitarianism is the broader description. And so Mormons were born as a philosophy, as a church, in the 1830s in New England, right? upstate New York, like the Book of Mormon soundtrack. America at the time, especially there, like that region, was experiencing a huge revivalism, like thinking about the Bible, but in a new world context, right? Because they'd been here for a while, and it was like, what about us, Mm-hmm. The churches that come out of that era and that place have the energy of like, oh, Brother Ephraim needs a barn. Let's build Brother Ephraim a barn, right? So you have the Amish, they come out of there then. Mm-hmm. The Quakers, like the oats people.
Quaker oats.
Yeah. The Quakers.
The cereals.
The Shakers. Yep. The Ona Idens, the ones that make silverware.
Oh, I hadn't even heard of those.
You think the Mormons were peculiar in the way they approach things? Ona Idens did their own special sauce on marriage.
Wow.
Yeah. It's a very interesting story, but a little too long for here. But Mormons, right?
Sure.
So they had this idea of, we're all in this together. And it's like High School Musical. We're all in this together. Right? That's like the attitude. Yeah. So the Amish, they turtle themselves, right? They just, and they stay in place, but they insulate themselves.
No technology at all.
Yeah. They insulate themselves from the world and they preserve it, right?
Yeah.
They time capsuled what it felt like there then.
Yeah.
They're not doing like a lot of proselytism either. So it's like they not only like probably think and relate to one another similar to as they did then, ultra high trust environments, but they're also like in ethnicity and nationality, like a subset of exactly what America in that region was in 1830, right? Mm-hmm. So the Mormons, let's say they cause some trouble. They end up they leave and they go to Illinois, Nauvoo, say they cause some trouble. They then fled south to Missouri. And by this point, there's like thousands and thousands of them, right? Mm-hmm. And then they get literally kicked out of Missouri and they go out west, like out past the country, right? They go out into Mexico territory and settle in Utah. That's how they get to Utah. And then they just kind of insulate themselves. Like there was a Utah war, like the U.S. Army like marched into Salt Lake City. It's really complicated, but they were very insular, right?
Yeah.
So what I think a lot of folks would mistake for like, this is because of what they would claim is this is because of the gospel. This is because of the good news that we know. And that's why it feels so good to be part of us. Right.
Yeah.
I think it's more an artifact of just the culture there then that they time capsuled. And so now when you like drive into Provo or Lehigh or some of these, communities that look the same way that America looked in 1830 with the immigration patterns they had then. And a lot of the philosophies, they're believing all the same things that they did in New York when they left or close to them. It's almost unimaginable for people that haven't been in it, but it feels so dang good. Like like brother, sister, like we call each other brother and sister, right? At BYU, our professors were brother and sister. Like that's what you call them, right?
Sure. But I guess brother or sister with an asterisk, I guess they ain't that way now, right?
That's funny. I actually had a chance to talk with one of them as I was losing my faith. It was my junior year at BYU. And I was taking courses to try to catch up to my wife. So it was like 18 credit hours of like evolutionary biology and medical micro and philosophy and history of the church. And it turns out the history of the church is different than what they would just teach you at Sunday school. Like I was hearing the authentic version of it, but it's like the unedited version of it. Right. And you're like, what happened? Like, why am I just learning about this now? It's really easy to discount. It's literally discount who's telling you something rather than what they're saying. So from a Mormon perspective, if somebody says something about the church, right? Or that's like, oh, they're reading anti-Mormon literature. That's what they call it, anti-Mormon literature. So it's questioning the agenda of the person who's sharing the information rather than engaging with the content of the information. That's easy. It's like, oh, that's on Fox News says that. We don't have to listen to that. Or CNN said this, right? Whatever. Like they just discount rather than engage. So just to wrap up this story, the church got away with that for a while, right? That's the easy one. Just boop. We don't even think about it. They have profit on their mind, or they're influenced by Satan, or they're of the world, whatever. But I had this semester where I was unable to. What I was learning at BYU was, it was like the spaces between the lines of what I knew. Because I was like I set the curve in sharing the gospel. Like I was like a Mormon's Mormon, like really, really, really hard. Like 200 people in the class. I was like,
I'm the most Mormon.
Number one out of 200, right?
Yeah.
So I knew the stories really well, but, anyways, it's just, I realized that when you get the full story, like, I don't know if I want to take digs at Mormonism here. I'll tell you a couple stories that are just worth repeating or worth sharing.
Yeah.
Mormons will know Joseph Smith. They'll know Emma, his wife. They'll know Sidney Rigdon, Oliver Cowdery. They'll know probably P. Pratt, a bunch of like the founder stuff, Brigham Young, right? And they'll know certain things about him. Like they'll know that Emma was Joseph's wife, but they'll kind of know that he had other wives, but they don't know the story of how it got there, right?
Sure.
Like Fanny Alger, just Fanny, like I think it's Fanny Alger, Alger. So talk to somebody who's like really about it and be like, do you know who Fanny Alger is or was? Odds are they won't. They won't. They're not going to know. Like it was Joseph's second wife, right?
Second wife.
Yeah. Like first other wife.
Gotcha.
Second wife, right?
Second wife. Does that mean there's 4 wives? I was on here.
Yeah, I guess it's not like they keep coming to say one a second, but it was the other one, right?
Okay.
And a long line of eventual wives. But, what they won't, one, they won't know that probably. Two, they won't know the situation, which I learned at BYU, right? So I couldn't discount the source. I'm learning it from the church's university, right? She was 14, which is whatever. It was like the 1840. Maybe you can discount that, but it's still like a little weird.
Yeah.
Her not being married, especially, right?
How old was he?
Oh, he's probably in his 30s.
Okay.
So she's the maid, right? She's the maid.
Yeah.
And she gets pregnant.
Uh-huh.
And then they're like, Fanny, who's the dad? And she's like, Brother Joseph. And I'm like, so like, wait, what? Like, this is the order it happened in, not like God told me to do it. And then of course he gets caught and he's like, God told me to.
Yeah.
His brother's furious. Everyone's furious. Like they'll know Oliver Cowdery and Martin Harris. They'll know that they were excommunicated, but they won't know why. There's like a gap in the story of like, there's a missing part, right?
Sure.
They'll like, Mormons will know Emma really well, but they won't know how the polygamy thing really rolled. Like that was the order it rolled in. She got pregnant. He got caught. He already a church leader. God told me to do it, right?
Sure.
Like, why not? It's like it's a classic, right? Classic maneuver.
It's the easiest get out of jail free card.
100%. And so he uses it and it doesn't work entirely. There's a lot of people who get excommunicated or don't accept it and the church has multiple fractures. But,
sure.
What I realized is that in order to be Mormon, in order to accommodate the framework, this intense framework that I had in my mind, I had to suspend disbelief.
Yeah.
Over multiple things, like going into Harry Potter land. And then imagine the writer like suddenly like takes a left turn and does something that's not at all in the world in keeping with the world.
Yeah.
Do that a time or two and it will fracture your ability to believe.
That's when my dreams fall apart.
Yeah.
Do too many of those that don't feel believable or don't feel along with the storyline.
Right. Looks like it's time.
All right.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. And, we'll pick this up on another podcast.
Sure. Oh, one last thing for the invitation. It's kind of about an alignment. It's kind of under the thought, what if you could get all your parts to feel in alignment with one goal and mission? Something to think about for later. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.